Hey there! For those of you who have been following my channel, you probably know that I have an affinity for snakes. Over the past few years, I've produced many videos featuring snakes which have included some in-depth comprehensive productions. For this video, I wanted to do something a little different, so I decided to compile a list where I rank my favorite snakes that I've seen in the wild. Originally, this was going to be a top 10 list, but I found it impossible to rank and limit the list to 10 snakes only. Even at 15, I felt that several snakes were wrongfully excluded, and after much debate and thought, I decided to settle on an odd number of 21 snakes, that as of the end of April 2023, are my favorite ones I have seen in the wild. The criteria I used for my ranking system was based mostly on bias and my personal opinion, but there are two main factors that prevented a snake from landing on the list. This included all of my encounters with invasive species and any native species that I have only seen dead or injured. So, without further ado, let's get the list started. We began my list with a snake that always makes slow herping outings more memorable, and that is the black racer. This long, feisty black colubrid might be common in many areas, but they never cease to captivate my attention. With that being said, I do think that there are certain areas where I find myself appreciating racers more than in others. In the southeast, I find the southern black racer and the Everglades racer to be more ubiquitous than the northern black racer from the northeast. Also, I find that the southern subspecies are not only shorter, but also narrower compared to their Yankee cousins, based on my experiences. In addition to being rarer and occurring in areas with lower snake diversities, I have found the northern black racers to be much girthier, which gives them the appearance of a poor man's indigo. But perhaps the most stunning and unique racer I have seen was an eastern yellow-bellied racer from Oklahoma. Regardless of where they are found, these common snakes are so fascinating, and I felt it would be disrespectful to not include them on the list. The cottonmouth is one of the most charismatic snakes to the southeastern United States, and one that is well established in culture and lore. There are many accounts of people who have boldly claimed that they have been chased by the dangerous water moccasin, and in many cases, these have occurred well outside of the snake's range where no populations have ever been documented. If I had $1 for every time a cottonmouth chased me, I would be broke. But I would be rich if I had $1 for every time these dangerous snakes fled at the sight of me, or decided to stand their ground and gape their mouths to look as intimidating as possible. A couple of years ago, seeing a cottonmouth for the first time was such a memorable experience. I have since been lucky to have crossed paths with this snake on so many occasions that it has been easy to lose appreciation for them. It was not until recently when I found the largest cottonmouth and one of the largest snakes I have ever seen in the wild that I was reminded as to how privileged I have been to have seen so many of these awesome snakes. If I had seen cottonmouths in places where they were not the most common snake in the area, then they would be ranked higher on my list for sure. In my anecdotal observations, I find that many field herpers are obsessed with finding snakes in the genre of Lampropeltis, and go to great lengths to do so. I do not consider myself to be in this group of herpers, but I can understand how they feel, as I struggle to limit Lampropeltis from appearing on this list. In a decision that may be controversial, I have decided to leave out the western milk snake, formerly known as the Louisiana milk snake, off the list, but instead include the eastern milk snake at the 19th spot. This is solely me being biased towards the only Lampripeltis that was found where I grew up, and while seeing an eastern milk snake was not a super rare occurrence, it was definitely something that didn't happen every day. I once found a 3+ footer chilling on my front door, only to never see it again, and another basking in a high elevated area alongside a rattlesnake. Most of the eastern milks I have seen were under debris and garbage, and their variable patterns were always easy to admire. As a result, I found myself unable to leave a classic species from my youth off my favorite snakes in the wild list. The genus of Ophiodries consists of only 2 species of snakes that are very unique and both made this list. The first, which I'm a little surprised isn't higher on my list, is the rough green snake. In my life, I have only seen this snake alive on 2 occasions, and found one that had been killed in herbicide spraying. The one live individual that I had gotten footage of ended up eating a spider right in front of our eyes. Rough greens, while not rare, can be challenging to find. They either randomly turn up on roads or one happens to shine them in trees at night. The bright uniform green coloration makes them stand out compared to most other snakes in the US, and this, along with them hanging from trees cloaked under the darkness of night, feels like you are looking at a tropical species. As fascinating as this is, I find myself appreciating the smaller cousin of the larger rough green more, which is probably why they are lower on my list. With that being said, I would love to see more rough greens in the wild. If there is one genre of snakes I find myself sometimes overlooking and even underappreciating, are the Nerodia. The sheer abundance of water snakes, especially in places with multiple species, doesn't make them resonate with me compared to other snake species that live in the same areas. But with that being said, I will never forget the first time I saw a Florida green water snake on the side of a road and being amazed at the massive colubrid I just found. The Florida green water snake is the largest Nerodia in the world, with females reaching up to 6 feet in length. To me, this, along with their massive girth, makes me feel like I'm staring at a small anaconda. With this snake only occurring in the southeastern US and being uncommon in some parts of their range, seeing a Florida green water snake, especially the adult females, is always eventful to me, and they are easily my favorite species of Nerodia. Throughout most of their range, the very cryptic nature and lower abundances of the scarlet snake makes finding one very memorable. In South Florida, where temperatures at night are very warm year-round, this fossorial snake can be seen with some regularity crossing roads. But if one decides to walk around in the surrounding woods at night, they might be lucky enough to see dozens of scarlet snakes. Since all but one of the scarlet snakes I have seen in the wild were found in South Florida, I do find myself appreciating these beautiful tricolored colubrids, but not as much as I would have if I found them in places where they are rarer. As a result, this is why I have the scarlet snake ranked where it is. The eastern copperhead was the first venomous snake I ever saw in the wild and is still one of my favorite snakes to find. Unlike some of the other snakes I have previously mentioned, including the other Echistrodon on this list, the cottonmouth, most of the copperheads I have seen were in places where they are not super common. In these lesser populated regions, the cryptic nature and life history of the copperhead has resulted in very memorable encounters with this pit viper. Camouflaged in the leaf litter, motionless copperheads have allowed me to admire their behavior and gorgeous pattern from an extended period of time. My encounters with the eastern copperhead in these areas have been some of my more enjoyable herping experiences, and is why I ranked them higher on my list. The black rat or eastern rat snake has always been a pleasant surprise for me to cross paths with in the wild. I've seen this snake where they are not common and in places where they are, but even in these latter areas, I still see them infrequently enough to always be excited when I come across one. The impressive length of these snakes, their arboreal nature, and the various different color morphs it integrates are all reasons why I find myself captivated towards the eastern rat snake. I found myself wanting to rank the rat snake higher on my list, and probably would have if I had only seen them in the northern part of the range. I have found many more species of snakes since those incredibly memorable encounters up north with rat snakes, and a dozen of these new lifers have caused the rat snake to fall lower on my list. But just because the rat snake has fallen on my list does not mean that my appreciation for them has as well. What many might call the red rat snake, and it essentially is, the corn snake is also different enough to rank them higher on my list. There are parts of this snake's range where they are very rare, but I've only seen them in places where they are common. In these areas, I see corn snakes pretty infrequently, which does make seeing one even more significant. I also find the pattern of the corn snake to be very stunning and variable enough to keep them interesting. But ultimately, I don't have a defining reason as to why I find these snakes so fascinating, other than the fact that I just do. Regardless, corn snakes are very awesome and I will never tire of seeing them. Rattlesnakes are a strong contender for my favorite group of snakes, and I will start off by talking about the smallest one of them. My luck at finding pygmy rattlesnakes has been strange, to say the least. While I've only seen the dusky, which is arguably the most common, they have still proven to be very elusive at times, especially in places where many have been reported. This has occurred almost exclusively in Florida, at sites where people have reported seeing a dozen or more while just out hiking. In these same areas, I have searched for hours, only to get completely skunked. Recently, I was finally able to find several pygmies in one night while out hiking in Florida. Prior to that, I had only found 2 in the entire state. The majority of pygmies I have seen were in Georgia, and were at places where few or none had been publicly reported. During the summer months, I have reliably seen them crossing dirt roads at night and during the evening. This has included the largest individual that I have seen to date, which was well over a foot long. From their small size and gorgeous patterns, I find myself being quite fond of the dusky pygmy rattlesnake, especially because I have gone through long droughts where I have not seen any. I find myself appreciating these snakes more than other people tend to. The eastern coach whip is one of the most charismatic snakes to the southeastern United States that I've only seen on 3 occasions. My lifer was a 5+ footer which shot across a dirt road and took shelter in the abutting vegetation for a couple minutes, allowing me to capture some quick footage. My second one disappeared into a saw palmetto thicket before I could even think about grabbing my camera. The last coach whip I found was flipped under a couch along a dirt road that we briefly posed for some photos. What stands out to me and so many others about coach whips are their unique coloration. The head and very interior part of the body is usually a uniform black, which fades into a uniform tan brown across the remaining posterior of the snake. The scales are so pronounced and shaped on the brown section of the snake that they look braided, almost like, go figure, a whip. Despite essentially being just glorified racers, which perform more xeric habitats, there is something about the eastern coach whip that wins over the hearts and minds of snake enthusiasts. Personally, I really like them a lot and want to find more. But the 3 times I have seen this snake have managed to keep them higher on my list. We continue with the Lampropeltis genre by adding one of their more stunningly patterned snakes. The black and yellow coloration of the speckled king snake is one of my favorites I have ever seen, and it made finding one for the first time a sight to behold. I was lucky enough to find 2 speckled king snakes on back-to-back days while living in Oklahoma under garbage and tin on the side of roads. While the first was an ecdysis, the second individual really showed off their eye-catching pattern. This was the follow-up to several skunk field outings that my friend Dean and I experienced before finally seeing this snake. Even though I find other species of kings and milk snakes to be more charismatic, there is something about the speckled king which makes them really stand out to me. I hope to see more someday down the line. My most recent native lifer was found around the time severe rain and flooding caused major gas shortages in South Florida. So finding a scarlet king snake at this time made road cruising totally worth it. My friend Judy and I were very lucky to have found this unique individual on 2 separate occasions, and I feel its pattern is as stunning as these snakes get. Regardless of how pretty they look, one does not simply walk outside and find a scarlet king snake. Their cryptic nature requires a lot of hours to be put in or simply dumb luck just to see one. Because of this, I think seeing a scarlet king is very significant and makes them worthy of being in the top 10 of my list. Despite being arguably the world's most encountered rattlesnake, the ubiquitous status of the western diamondback does not cause them to lose points on my list. I hope to someday experience nights where I find tons of these snakes, like so many do, but in the meantime, I will continue to gloat on where I found my lifer and only western diamondback rattlesnake. Living in Oklahoma, this snake can be very common in the prairie grasslands in the western part of the state, but I was unable to see one on several searches in this area. The only western diamondback I saw was on a warm November night along a rocky outcrop located with cave salamanders in a mixed hardwood forest along the Arkansas border. This is the one place where this snake is uncommon, so it instantly propelled them into the top 10 on my list. My one encounter with the eastern king snake was with a very young individual along the side of some drift fencing, and as cool as it was, it kind of felt like a tease. Seeing an adult eastern king is something I am looking forward to experiencing one day, given their sheer power, appetite for venomous snakes, and just stunning patterns. Yet this one individual was enough to rank the eastern king as my favorite Lampropeltis I have seen to date. A hidden gem in the forest of the Northeast, and one that required a lot of effort to find, was the second Ophiodries, the smooth green snake. While locally abundant in some places, the bright green coloration makes the snake so easy to miss in its environment, or they are just completely absent from many areas in their range. I find the smooth green to be one of the most vibrant snakes I have ever seen in the wild. Ultimately, maybe it's the smooth scales, but I find the smooth green snake to be superior in every way to its rough cousin, for really no definitive reason. Regardless, the smooth green is a very unique snake in its range. It can be very difficult to find. So that, and along with my personal experiences with this snake, which were very enjoyable and memorable, is why I have them very high on my list. Every snake I have talked about to this point I greatly enjoy, but do find myself even still debating where they fall on my list. But the top 5 snakes on my list are just on another tier for me personally, and are easily my favorite snakes. We start the top 5 with the largest rattlesnake in the world, and that is the eastern diamondback. The words majestic, beautiful, and grandiose are just a few titles I give to the king of America's pit vipers. Overall, I find the eastern diamondback superior to its western cousin, but I think its more pronounced pattern, occurring in areas with fewer rattlesnakes and rarer status, are the biggest reasons for this statement. I have been fortunate to have seen nearly a dozen eastern diamondbacks in the wild over the past year alone, and each one feels like seeing a lifer for most other snakes. EDBs never cease to leave me speechless and surprised when finding one, and will continue to do so, hopefully, for years to come. Last year, I experienced one of my most memorable snake finds to date when I found my lifer eastern mud snake crossing a road in South Georgia. Since then, I have yet to see another, despite spending countless hours and hundreds of miles road cruising for them. The mud snake is one of the most cryptic colubrids in the southeastern U.S. and has one of the most unique life histories. Them, along with the other member of their genus, the rainbow snake, are the only semi-aquatic snakes in the U.S. that lay eggs, and mud snakes themselves exclusively feed on very large salamanders. The difference between adult and hatchling size is also greater than any other snake. When captured, the mud snake will release a pleasant-smelling musk, if such a phrase even exists, and instead of biting, they will stab you repeatedly with their sharp, pointy tails. The pattern is also incredibly stunning, with red bands streaked across a smooth black body, but anrithristic individuals are not uncommon, so profoundness of the red varies. These interesting life history characteristics of the eastern mud snake and the fact they are so bloody hard to find are all why they are so high on my list. There are few feelings that are better than hiking in the Appalachian Mountains and coming across a rookery of timber rattlesnakes. Finding my favorite rattlesnake in the wild is something I have done on several occasions, and all are easily at the top of my favorite herping memories. The communal nature of these snakes is something that is so captivating to watch, but in some parts of the northern Appalachians, it has led to their downfall. A symbol of America that has been so wrongfully persecuted in these areas to the point where many who will never see a timber rattlesnake refuse to coexist alongside it, has been one of the biggest conservation tragedies I have experienced.
It's a heated yet intriguing debate, protecting an endangered snake versus the fear of placing potentially deadly vipers on the Quabbin Reservoir.
Only on 22 News, I-Team reporter Ryan Walsh gives us an in-depth look at the Rattlesnake Island controversy.
We're on the edge of the Quabbin here in Belchertown, a few miles away from where the state wants to create a colony of timber rattlesnakes beginning next year.
Is the Quabbin Reservoir a good place for these timber rattlesnakes?
I don't think so.
The people that hike in there and go bird watching and all that stuff, the word gets around to snakes and they ain't gonna go.
We do fish out there, and the DCR rents boats, and boats sometimes break down. What happens if a family is out there, 2 kids and a mother and dad, they break down on Mount Zion?
What do you think is going to happen to my property values when it becomes known that the state has created a snake island inside the Quabbin? And from my perspective, I'm wondering, much of their concerns were laid as, that's just the fear of folks against the snakes. But to the people here, it's real.
I am furious. I live in Massachusetts. Used to think it was a civilized place. Do we really need rattlesnakes in Massachusetts?
Yes!
The Massachusetts Department of Fisheries and Wildlife has noticed, gee, we don't have as many rattlesnakes as Massachusetts used to have. Well, I think that's a good thing.
Stop it.
But they don't. Why would they want things the way they were way back when? We now have people and buildings and highways and cars and trains, and we don't need rattlesnakes.
Are you sure about that?
Are they doing it just because they have nothing better to do, nothing better to worry about?
Is the goal to help an endangered species, or is this more of a science experiment?
It's to ensure we do not lose timber rattlesnakes.
Rattlesnakes are venomous. They have killed people.
Are you really in danger of getting bit?
The CDC says there are 7,000 to 8,000 venomous snake bites in the U.S. each year. From 1999 to 2014, it was more likely to die from a venomous spider than a venomous snake, and about 9 times more likely to die from a hornet, wasp, or bee sting. If you do get bit,
ideally, if you can get treatment within 6 hours with antivenom, the outcome is almost like 99% survival.
When I imagined a rattlesnake, I was imagining something about a foot long. No, that's how long they are when they're born. They become 3 feet long. Can you imagine walking along in the woods on a nice day with your family perhaps, maybe your children, and whoa, what do you see sunning on a rock but a 5-foot-long rattler that has decided to scare you?
Stop it. Get some help.
What good are rattlesnakes? Well, let's see. Besides scaring people, they eat mice. Well, yes, we do have mice, and we don't usually like them. But that's what owls are for.
Continuing coverage, the State Division of Fisheries and Wildlife has voted to suspend the plan to establish a colony of timber rattlesnakes in the Quabbin Reservoir. 22 News reporter Haley Crumbleholm heard from residents who were reacting to the news.
Timber rattlesnakes are endangered in Massachusetts, and some saw suspension of the plan as a bad sign for the species.
I was a big fan of them bringing them to the island and allowing a population of rattlesnakes to flourish in the Quabbin. So I'm a little disappointed to hear it won't be happening.
Fortunately, there are some parts of their range where the timber is still common, and these occur in places where they are referred to as canebrake rattlesnakes. It amazes me how canebrakes are not a separate subspecies from the Appalachian timbers, but despite living a different way of life, I still appreciate canebrakes just as much and feel that they can be more challenging to find. Ultimately, it is my own personal experiences with the timber rattlesnake that have made them one of my all-time favorites. The emperor of the forest is the eastern indigo snake, and it is considered to be a white whale for many snake enthusiasts. America's longest native snake has suffered drastic losses and has now been restricted mostly to just Georgia and Florida. To date, I have only seen one of these snakes in the wild, and it was an all-time snake tail. On a mild January day in Georgia, I was exploring some xeric sandhill habitat when I stumbled across a gopher tortoise at the entrance of its burrow. I tried capturing some cell phone footage of the tortoise, and in the process of doing so, a young indigo started to emerge from the burrow. I did not see the indigo until I looked down and it appeared right underneath me. In complete disbelief, I quickly captured a short clip of the indigo with my cell phone before creeping ever so slowly back to my camera bag. I was very lucky to capture some footage of the indigo and the gopher tortoise in the same frame together. After just a couple minutes, the indigo retreated back into the burrow, wrapped itself around the gopher tortoise to say goodbye, and ventured back underground. In less than 5 minutes, I got to interact with one of America's most imperiled snakes that at the time struggled to comprehend was even real. I can't think of another snake species that I want to see again in the wild someday more than the eastern indigo snake. My all-time favorite snake I've seen in the wild took more than 50 hours of wandering through pine barren forests and many defeated drives home where I contemplated their existence and why I was wasting my time before I actually found one. Of all the snakes I've seen in the wild, the eastern hog-nosed snake has been my favorite to find. Their incredible variation of pattern and coloration, the ability to hood like a cobra, hiss loudly when threatened, and fake their own death makes them so unique in my opinion. In addition to this, It is also the challenge of finding eastern hognoses, which makes encountering one so rewarding.
Well, today I had my doubts, but I came out, spent a couple hours searching, and I found not one, but 3 eastern hognose snakes. So I am right now beyond ecstatic. It was such a great experience.
In late September of 2020, I had my first true encounter with a hognose when I found 2 males courting a much larger female. The female was easily the largest hognose I have ever seen to date, as she was 3 feet in length. After leaving the area and releasing the snakes, I came back to collect my camera gear and heard them in the adjacent brush working their way back together. I quickly realized this was likely an attempted mating event and immediately left, hoping they would continue. Looking back on it now, I would have handled this situation much differently, but was caught up in the excitement and emotion of seeing a hognose snake for the first time. In May of 2021, my friend called me saying that he found an eastern hognose snake, and I rushed over to photograph it. The snake did not hood once, let alone attempted to feign death, which made for a very memorable encounter. Later that summer, I had a surprise encounter with an eastern hognose that I flipped under a cement block with temperatures in the 90s. The snake showed off an impressive hooding display, and we returned it back after our photo session. The last eastern hognose snake I've seen in the wild was during October of 2022, when my friend Dean flipped a young individual under a rock. The snake would go on to fake its own death, but ended up resurrecting itself. All of my encounters with the eastern hognose snake were truly unforgettable, and I hope to continue to see more of my favorite snake in the wild. Well, that is the end of my list of favorite snakes I have seen in the wild, and I'm sure there are snake enthusiasts and herpers right now that are reacting like this.
You're insane! Yeah. You understand that?
I knew!
Do you understand that? I am at a loss for words. I am at a loss for words.
Why?
I cannot believe what I just heard.
Because clearly you're blasphemy with that list. How could you show up on national TV and do such a thing? I mean, this isn't Halloween. This isn't Halloween. This is April Fool's. This is April 1st. You don't make a joke like that. It's horrible. That's a horrible, horrible selection.
All jokes aside, over the next few years, this list might look drastically different as I continue to find more lifer snakes in the wild. But I figured I would stop at a point in time and review the snakes I have seen up to that point, and which ones I like more than others. If you liked this video, consider subscribing to my channel and check out some of the other snake and wildlife related content I have. Thank you so much, and have a great day.